Hello, my name is Dan Sulmasy. I'm the Andre Helliger's Professor of Biomedical Ethics in the Departments of Medicine and Philosophy and Director of the Kennedy Institute of Ethics at Georgetown University. It's my privilege to welcome you to our program. I'm sure that many of you have already seen our president and provost welcome you, but I'm the director of the Kennedy Institute, and it's my privilege to also welcome you to our program. And what I'd like to do is run you through a little bit about the Kennedy Institute itself very quickly, go over its past, its present at time, and its future. This is our 50th anniversary, and that's a pretty profound thing for anybody in academia, and it's part of what's exciting about this program. We're celebrating our 50th year in existence. We were founded in 1971 by Dr. Andre Helligers. The program was initially very much centered as in the medical center and the main campus as a joint program, and at its very beginning was incredibly interdisciplinary with three different programs, one in bioethics, one in population, and one in reproductive biology. It eventually became, as many of you know and have benefited from, more closely focused on bioethics and more closely tied to the philosophy department. Some of the former bioethics faculty of the Kennedy Institute are an amazing list of who's who in the field. They include Andre Helligers, Leroy Walters, Dick McCormick, Tris Engelhardt, Larry McCullough, Jim Childress, Tom Beecham, Bob Veach, Ed Pellegrino, Madison Powers, Warren Reich, Hans-Martin Sass, Rahito Kimura, Leon Cass, Bill May, John Langen, and many others that you'll see on the list. It almost reads like a who's who of bioethics in the United States. We also had, early on, a number of important visiting faculty at the Kennedy Institute, and they included Paul Ramsey, for instance, who spent time on the hospital wards in his early days of moving into bioethics. John Fletcher, John Harvey, Frank Abel, Bernard Haring, and others, again, that you see on the slide. Again, people who went on to be notable figures in bioethics or people in other fields who took influence from the Kennedy Institute into their own work. Many of you also know some of the outstanding things that the Kennedy Institute has brought to the world, particularly in bioethics. One of those is the intensive bioethics course, and our program this week is taking the place of what had been our intensive bioethics course, and hopefully next year we'll be doing it live, but for now we're doing it over the internet. The PhD program in philosophical bioethics that developed here has educated many of the people who are running bioethics programs all over this country and the world. Our visiting researcher program, again, has been incredibly international, enriching us, enriching the world of bioethics. You probably know that our bioethics research library was the first of its kind in the world and continues to be the largest, and I will brag, still the best. We developed at Georgetown Bioethics Line, the first online reference source in bioethics, eventually taken up into National Library of Medicine's Medline, but all of the initial work to do that and get it up was done here. Leroy Walters in particular, but with the help of others, developed an outstanding program in genetics and ethics. We had a high school program early on in bioethics, recognizing that bioethics is for everybody. We developed the first encyclopedia of bioethics under Warren Reich, and of course have had enormous scholarly input and influence. Many of you have probably been educated and read some of the books by our outstanding faculty. Here's just a list of some of them for you to see. We also have very much been teachers of the teacher. And I want to take you back to the late 1970s. I think this was 1978. And this is a photo from the intensive bioethics course then. And I'll give those of you who are listening in who may have been around a while a chance to look at these pictures and see if you can remember who they are or recognize who they are. But they are from the intensive bioethics course way back. Dr. Mark Siegler, who went on to establish the McLean Center for Clinical Bioethics at the University of Chicago, and Marcia Fowler, who went on to a career in religious bioethics in California. Just two small examples of the kind of reach that the Kennedy Institute's programs has had and influence all over the world. Our current stellar faculty include our senior research scholars, Sean Oss, John Keown, Quil Kukla, Maggie Little, Joel Reynolds, Henry Richardson, Karen Storr, and myself. And we also have a teaching faculty and clinical scholars, Laura Bishop, who really, in essence, runs the place. I'm only the titular person in charge. Over at the Pellegrino Center, Kevin Donovan and Miles Sheehan, both physicians. And at the nursing school, Carol Taylor. We have an outstanding staff, Roxy France-Nuridden, Patty Martin, John Zarillo. At the library, John Zarillo is our latest librarian. He's an archivist. We have a great administrative staff, Mike and Lucas. We have now, many of you are aware, there'll be a presentation today on the ethics lab. The director is Maggie Little, assisted by Jonathan Healy and Sydney Lucan. And our fellows and part-time faculty at the ethics lab include Marcelo, Mark, Alicia, and Susan Conklin, taking design principles and using them in a creative way for teaching and research in ethics. That's the past and the present. What about the future? I'm looking to the next 50 years. We have some outstanding opportunities in front of us. The beginning, we're going to be hiring some new faculty. We have empty chairs, the Joseph Kennedy chair, the McNamara chair. We have a position that'll be coming up in the next year or two for a junior faculty hire. We began 2 years ago to reboot the intensive bioethics course. Once the pandemic is over, we're going to reboot the IBC. Our library is moving ahead with special collections, digitization, and concentrating intensively on improving our archival collections. We're moving to closer collaborations with the Pellegrino Center, to postdoctoral fellowships like the McDonald Agape Fellowship in Bioethics, and some new and old areas of focus in disability, genetics, Islamic bioethics, and if we're lucky, some more work on medicine and the Holocaust. I want to tell you, too, about something called the Emergent Ethics Network at Georgetown, which I'm excited to be a part of. If you were to think about 3 possible areas of ethical concern at the intersection of science and society, I think they would be these: biomedicine, the environment, and big data. And we want to take those topics on here at Georgetown, not only in an individual way as topics, but in an integrated and interdisciplinary way. Because all of those issues are intertwined. When you think about data ethics, for instance, per se, you're thinking about what happens to your GPS data, what happens to robotics, what happens to your financial data. But data is also intertwined with medicine, electronic medical records and what happens to the data there, genomic data, what happens to the data there. And it's also intertwined with even environmental ethics. How do we account for what's good and what's a harm? And how do we wind up crunching data for our forecasting? And all of these topics are intertwined. They also have some cross-cutting ethical themes from each of these areas. What are our concepts of the good, justice, racial justice, dignity, freedom, privacy, harm, the common good, duties and rights, whole-part relationships, and the relationships between human beings and nature. And so here's a draft I'll share with you now very quickly of our master plan to sort of say Georgetown is going to be at the forefront of understanding these topics and working on them in an interdisciplinary, cross-cutting, integrated way that will involve the Kennedy Institute of Ethics, the Pellegrino Center for Clinical Bioethics, our new environmental justice program, and our about to be launched Center for Digital Ethics. Some programs will be shared, some will be individual, but we will all work together. We use the word emergent to describe this, the Emergent Ethics Network, and we're saying it in two senses. One is that there are new, dynamic, and unfolding ethical concerns in each of these areas, big data, the environment, biomedicine. But there are also, in the sense, emergent properties that supervene upon the interrelated parts. And when we think about integrating ethical research about these kinds of topics together, we're confident that we are going to be creating new knowledge that wouldn't be possible without this sort of integrated approach. To give you just a little bit of an idea of how this might work, the concepts of the good, well, I'll give you the example of COVID and how this works. So concepts of the good are at play, whether we save lives or save life years. Questions of justice are at play, for instance, in the global distribution of vaccines, racial justice in the way racial disparities have been uncovered by COVID. Questions about dignity. What if we send robots in to care for people who are isolated? Freedom becomes a cross-cutting issue. Lockdowns and liberty are at play with one another. Privacy is a concern in data ethics and COVID. What do we do about tracking? What count as harms? Is it merely the medical ones, or do we think about environmental and socioeconomic harms? What happens to the common good versus individual rights and duties? And then we think about the relationship of humans to nature. How did this pandemic even start? It started because of where human beings live, how they relate to animals, how viruses track around the world, how even our air conditioning can exacerbate the spread of these diseases. So we think that a network is the way to solve these kinds of questions in the future. COVID is just one example. We have new leadership at Georgetown. A French Jesuit economist, Gaël Giraud, is in charge now of our environmental justice program. Miles Sheehan at the Pellegrino Center, and myself at the Kennedy Institute, and soon we'll have somebody running our digital ethics center. And for the future, our view is it takes a network to do ethics. The Kennedy Institute is going to be a proud part of that, because the problems we face today are intertwined. No one can do this alone. We need theoreticians and practitioners working together in bioethics, but we also need specialists in biomedicine, data science, and the environment to be working together as well. So I hope you've enjoyed hearing a little bit about where the Kennedy Institute has been, where it is now, and where we hope to go in the future. We'd love to have you continue to be partners with us in this great academic adventure. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the program.